God bless you. My name is Pastor Harris Kakalides, and today's topic will be the Christian responsibility towards the Jew. And there's been lots of false gospels being preached, especially in TBN, John Hagee being one of them, saying that the Jewish people are saved without the gospel. That they're saved through the Torah, through following the law. And that reminds me of a heresy that was back in the second and 3rd century. It was found in the Homilies of Clement, book chapter 8, chapter 7. I want to read this. I don't believe this. This is against heresy. This is against what the gospel preaches. But this is something John Hagee is teaching. It says Thus the Hebrews are not condemned because they did not know Jesus, provided only they act according to the instructions of Moses, and do not injure him whom they did not know. And again, the offspring of the Gentiles are not judged who have not known Moses, provided only they act according to the words of Jesus, and do not injure him whom they did not know. This is actually the belief of many churches nowadays, saying that you don't have to preach the gospel to the Jewish people because the Jewish people are saved without Christ. And this is a heresy. This is against what the gospel teaches. The Bible tells us very clearly that both Jews and Gentiles are saved through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation. There is no other way to be saved for both Gentiles and Jewish people alike but through Jesus Christ. The Bible tells us in John chapter 1, it tells us, verses 12 and 13, it tells us that just because you're Jewish, you're not saved by being Jewish. It's only through Jesus Christ. Look at what the Bible tells us. But as many as receive him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. Notice it says not of blood. In other words, not because your family are Jewish that you are saved. Also, the Bible tells us in Romans very clearly, Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17 tells us, For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. If we go to Romans chapter 3, let's go to verses 9. It says, What then? Are we better than the Jewish people or than they? No, in no wise, for we have both proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin. And then if you continue and you go to verses 21 to 24, it says, But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifest, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ unto all and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Hallelujah. God bless you. This is Pastor Harris Kakalides again with the Christian responsibility towards the Jew. And we do have a responsibility towards the Jew besides the gospel, of course, preaching them the gospel, because salvation is only through Jesus Christ. I want to make that clearly. There's only one way to heaven. The Bible also tells us that we're supposed to pray for the Jewish people, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper and love thee. Psalms 122 verse 6. Pray for their peace, and we know there won't be peace till they receive the Messiah, the Prince of Peace. We have a responsibility to help the Jewish people in many ways. I want to go to Romans chapter 15, verses 26 to 27. For if it pleased them of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the saints, poor saints, which are in Jerusalem, and if it had pleased them verily, and their debtors they are, for if the Gentiles have been made partakers of their spiritual things, their duty is also to minister unto them carnal things. We're responsible to minister to the Jews carnal things as well. Paul is talking to the church which is at Rome. This is Romans 15 verses 26 27, which I just read. And he's saying that, and he was telling them, if you have received spiritual blessings from the Jews, you need to share the physical things as well. What things have we received from the Jews? Number one is the Bible. Number two is our Jesus. And number three, our salvation. Bible, number one. Most of the writers of the Bible were Jewish people except for four, which was Luke in the New Testament. He wrote Luke, Acts, and some people think that he wrote Hebrews. All due to the Greek, because it's the best Greek in the New Testament. And the other is Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament, with two more, with King Haggah and King Lamel, which they were from Massa. They were not Jewish kings. You don't find them in the genealogy or the chronological of the kings of Israel or the kings of Judah. But you do find the word Massa in Genesis 25 verses 12 to 16, saying that Massa was a tribe from Ishmael. So they were not Jewish people. King Lamel and King Haggah, Massa was from Massa, and they wrote Proverbs 30 and 31. So we see three from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament. Of 929 chapters in the Old Testament, 3 of them was written by Gentiles. Number two, our Jesus, God in human form, came to earth as a Jew. He did not come to earth as a Chinese or American, but a Jew. Martin Luther, before he became anti-Jewish or anti-Semitism, wrote a book which was published in 1523, named that Jesus Christ was born a Jew. Romans 9 verses 4 and 5 tells us, who are the Israelites, and to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, and the promises, whose are the fathers, and whom concerning the flesh Christ came, who is over all, God blessed forever. And ESV, which I like, it says in the end, who is God over all. And the third blessing, our salvation. Remember what Jesus told us, the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4 verses 22. For salvation comes from the Jews. If it wasn't the Jewish rejection of Jesus as their Messiah, we would have never had a chance at him. Because the Jews rejected Jesus, we now have a chance in salvation. When Jesus came, he came for the lost sheep of Israel, not the Gentiles, not the non-Jewish people. Matthew 10 verses 5 and 6, Jesus sends the 12, and he tells them, don't go in the way of Gentiles or Samaritans. The Samaritans were Jews that were mixed with Gentiles. In Matthew 15 verses 24, I don't know if you remember the Greek woman that she had her daughter possessed with a demon, and she went to Jesus, and she wasn't a Jewish woman, and Jesus tells her, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of Israel. In Matthew 21 verses 33 to 44, we see Jesus mentioning a parable, saying because the Jewish rejection, the salvation was going to come to the Gentiles. We go to John chapter 1 verses 11 and 12, where we see that it's not by blood, it's not because my parents are Jewish that I'm saved, but is through Jesus Christ, is through receiving Jesus Christ. We see this in John chapter 1 verses 11 to 12. Actually 12 and 13 is John chapter 1 verses 12 to 13. As we continue in Acts chapter 13 verses 45 to 47, in Acts chapter 28 verses 24 to 28, we see that because of the Jewish rejection, salvation is come to the Gentiles. Paul says it. But let's go to Romans chapter 11 verses 1. Where Paul states that he is also was a Jew. Romans chapter 11 verses 1, Paul states, I say, have God cast away his people? God forbid, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. But let's go to verses 11 to 14. I say then, have they stumbled, the Jewish people, that they should fall, that they should be cast away forever? God forbid, but rather through their fall salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. God is planning to provoke the Jewish people to jealousy through the salvation of the Gentiles. Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am apostles of the Gentiles, I might magnify my office. If by any means I may provoke to jealousy them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. And if we read verses 25 to, we find out that the Gentiles are being saved till a certain number comes, and then all the Jewish people will come to Christ. For I would not, brethren, that ye be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye would be wise in your own consent, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. In verses 26, and so all Israel shall be saved. So God is planning to save a number of Gentiles, a number of non-Jewish people. Once that number has come, then the whole nation of Israel will be converted to Christ, will come to Christ. We see this in Zechariah 12, where it will weep for him as their only child. But I want to finish with us reading Ephesians to focus on what blessing we have in Jesus, in having salvation. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 to 13. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called, this is Ephesians 2:11, who are called uncircumcised by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, the Jewish people, that at that time ye were without Christ. Gentiles, non-Jewish, were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of the promise, having no hope without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off, are made now by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who have made both one, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in the ordinance, for to make in himself of twain one new man, and making peace. I want you to know that before we didn't have God in the world, we didn't have Christ, we didn't have peace, we didn't have salvation. We were on our way to hell. Well, thank God that the rejection came so we can have a chance at salvation, and then they will come to Christ in the future. But till then, we have to pray for the Jewish people, and we have to help them financially, those who are poor and are Jewish. And we also have a responsibility to preach them the gospel. God bless you.